Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to everybody. My name is Gianni De Gennaro. I'm the chairman of this Center for American Studies. First of all, I'm very proud to host today such an important meeting in this ancient building where we have our headquarters. Welcome to the Wilson Center alumni, to the panelists, moderators, to the Italian guests, and to the Center for American Studies members. Welcome back to the US Ambassador in Italy, John Phillips, and thank you, John, to be here again. I'd like to welcome back also Honorable Jane Harman, the Wilson Center President and CEO who came months ago to chair an important workshop here. Thanks again. I met Mrs. Harman for the first time at the ambassador residence about a year ago, and I was really impressed by her inspired analysis of worldwide security problems, especially in critical areas. I'd like to express her the gratitude of the Center for American Studies Board, who is present here with a lot of members, for choosing our institution for the annual European Alumni Meeting of the Wilson Center. Thank you again, Mrs. Harman, for giving us the opportunity to host this event. My personal greetings to President Giuliano Amato, Judge of the Italian Constitutional Court, former chairman and now honorary chairman of this center, and last but not least, alumnus of the Wilson Center. Special greetings to the Minister of Interior, who will come in the afternoon, Angelino Alfano, and to the former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Marta Dassù. Their presence today is a significant plus, providing us the experience and the Italian point of view for the interesting discussion that we run today. Unfortunately, for a personal issue, the Undersecretary for the Intelligence, Marco Minniti, will not join us today as scheduled. At the same time, let me express my special gratitude to the 3-star General Carlo Magrassi. He is the military advisor for the Italian Prime Minister and expert of space and cybersecurity. He accepted to participate to the discussion despite the short notice. The main theme of today's seminar represents a key aspect in the mission of the Center for American Studies. As we speak of transatlantic relations at a time of crisis and raise the question, common threats, different responses, we are focusing on cultural, political, and economic subjects concerning transatlantic relations. In other words, we are investigating common opportunities and threats in order to have a frank and open debate aiming to deliver common responses instead of different ones in the full respect of mutual ideas. President Wilson at Princeton University said, "We are not put into the world to sit still and know, we are put in to act. We cannot anyone according to its own role." I believe that today's meeting absolutely fits with the President Wilson's purposes. In this perspective, I have no doubt that any of our distinguished guests that are present here today will be able to make constructive suggestions for any of the 3 discussions. And before concluding, and before to leave the floor to the Ambassador John Phillips for his opening remarks, let me express my personal gratitude to our spokesperson, Paolo Messa, who worked very close with the Wilson Center to organize this meeting today. Thank you to everybody and have a good work.
Chairman DeGennaro, thank you for the introduction. And thank you also to the Center for American Studies for hosting this gathering of alumni and friends associated for a long period with the Wilson Center for Scholars. The institute you lead here in Rome has, for decades, brought together the brightest minds on both sides of the Italian-American relationship, as well as friends from around the world, to discuss the pressing issues of the day. Today is a striking example of what you do so well in this magnificent facility. It's a pleasure to see so many distinguished Italian and American friends gathered here with colleagues from as far afield as Egypt, Ukraine, and Russia to talk through some of the most recent and profound challenges that we face internationally. It's a particular pleasure to see my new Italian friend, Professor Giuliano Amato, introducing an old American friend of 40 years, the distinguished former U.S. Representative Jane Harman, now director of the Woodrow Wilson Center, who will be delivering the keynote address this morning. Both of you have dedicated years of public service to addressing the balance of international crisis with domestic law and governance. And we're fortunate to have you both here to share some of that wisdom with us. The agenda for today provides a tour de horizon of the most difficult issues we face in the international arena, from global intelligence sharing and gathering to the reemergence of cross-border territorial aggression in Europe, to the destabilization of Mideast states struggling towards democracy by extremism and religious intolerance. That's without even touching on the reappearance in Africa of Ebola. These are all, as a social scientist would say, wicked problems. Having said that, I can't imagine a group of scholars and practitioners better qualified to grapple with solutions than those gathered in this room. I particularly enjoyed the opportunity to meet so many of you yesterday, and I gave me a renewed and continuing appreciation for the extraordinarily important work that the Wilson Center does. So with that, let me turn it over to Professor Amato.
I had the sense, as the former chairman of this institute, I hear also minor details, but that microphone is better than these ones, perhaps, this morning, and I don't understand why. Your voice was very clear. Anyhow, can you hear me clearly? Okay, that's fine. Sorry for... otherwise we should, but I mean, it's okay from here. Well, let me start all over again. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here because this is where I have lived for several years. I'm proud of this center, of the role it has played and still is playing for keeping the excellent relationships between Italy and the US alive, as they should be. And I'm really grateful to Ambassador Phillips because since his arrival, he has taken the center seriously, as the center deserves. And I'm so happy that after me, the center has found Gianni DeGennaro as a chairman, because I left the center months ago with some worries about its future, I must say. Nowadays, I feel confident that it is much better than it was when I left it. So this is quite a compliment for you. And I'm also happy for this occasion to meet also people that were at the Wilson Center as he was when I was there more than 30 years ago in 1982. It was my first sabbatical year. I was funded by the German Marshall Fund, which at the time funded European scholars going to the States. Now they do it the other way around. Which is quite unpleasant, but I understand. I spent the first part of my sabbatical year at the Brookings, and then I was accepted at the Wilson Center, and it was a wonderful experience because my research was already over. And therefore, I was just polishing the final draft of my booklet. And so I could do what the great director of the time, now the Wilson Center has a great director indeed, but you have to admit that James Billington was and is a mythical figure. One of the most forceful minds I ever met in my life, and he still is so. I was telling him whenever I go to Washington, I go to the library and we have a talk. He's an incredible man even now. For me, getting older, it's a promise of a future because is much older than I am, and I must say that you can't perceive the difference. And what did he want? What did he want from us? He wanted us to stay in our rooms, working, going to the library, doing. But at 5 o'clock, all of us should show up in the common living rooms and stay together. Talk to each other, socialize, that's the verb, which in my view has a profound meaning because it was the, let's say, the first essential step for people coming from different countries and from different cultures to understand each other, which is so important. At the time, perhaps we could not realize how important it is today. Facing, as we are facing, such a different world, different from our expectations. I must say, I will be in New York next week, having to do several things and having to give a talk to some colleagues and students of the NYU. I chose as the title and the substance of this talk, From Triumphant Democracies to Democracies Under Siege. Because this is the way I feel it today. Because when I left the center, in a few years after that time, we had the illusion of democracies spreading around all over the world, the end of history. It was quite wrongly written. Instead, we understand that around us there are different cultures that on the one side understand democracy in a different way and reject it. Some of them reject it. How to cope with this different reality? How to cope with Russia that we expected years ago to begin its long route toward building a democracy? What are they building now? And what about the success that are having positions around the world that are somehow against us? There is here a contradiction that is not completely clear to me. On the one side, our values, our principles are spreading throughout the world. I can see it as a judge of a constitutional court. all of the international courts throughout the world are applying a rule of law which is nurtured by our values and our cultures. Personal freedom, independence of the judiciary, separation of powers, freedom of speech. This is the core of the rule of law for everybody in the world. At the same time, our societies are not seen as the, let's say, expression of these values. This is perhaps part of our problems that was wonderfully caught by Hillary Clinton repeatedly, but I happened to read what I think in her review of the latest Henry Kissinger's book, The World Order, where she wrote, let me quote her because she's an important woman and I hope she will become even more important, but this is my personal opinion, when she writes that the United States is uniquely positioned to lead in the 21st century, not just because of the enduring strength of our military or the resilience of our economy, although both are absolutely essential. It goes deeper than that, she writes. It is our diverse and open society, our devotion to human rights and democratic values that gives us a singular advantage. Why? Because you are a leader not only because of the strength you have in the world, but because of the legitimacy that comes from peoples and not from governments. Now, the problem here is how to strengthen our legitimacy. We have found the way to send drones and aircrafts in a difficult area of the world. This is essential, but it's not enough. And therefore, there is a problem of being, on the one side, more consistent inside to our own values, and to understand the others. This could be quite a long speech. I don't have the time here, but this is something that in this center has been debated and will be debated also in the future. We have to understand that there are societies in which religion plays a higher role than in some of ours. And this is not necessarily against democracy. Might be part of a different scheme, which, and I finish with this one, is more American than Western. And here there is a difference between your society and ours own in Europe that is quite relevant and that could allow the US even more easily than Europe also to talk to the others and to understand the others. Because, and I finish here, the Europeans are somehow have somehow built their contemporary democracies on the French basic principle according to which religion has to do with the individual life of everybody, but not necessarily it should somehow have an impact on the collective life of a society. This is very much French, but it's not American. Because you have the separation of religion from the state in the sense that the state should not interfere. And this is what has to spread around. But the fact that society should conform as a collective body to religious values, this is part of your notion of democracy. It was so at the time of John Dewey. It has remained so, even now. So you are positioned, as Hillary Clinton says, perhaps more than we are, as a bridge with the others. But we have to use this bridge, and we have to understand the others better. Otherwise, the extreme positions will prevail on both sides. And therefore, what James Billington asked us 30 years ago, at 5 o'clock, come around and talk to the others, socialize, understand what they think and allow them to understand what you think. This is an essential exercise for the world of the future. And I'm glad that we are here to write a chapter of this thing in this center that is equipped for this job. Thank you.
Buongiorno. I'm Jane Harmon, the president and CEO of the Wilson Center, and Giuliano Amato has just made it very difficult for me to deliver keynote remarks. He just delivered keynote remarks with which I totally agree. So a bridge has already been built between Cass, the former Cass leader, the old Wilson Center and the new Wilson Center. So we have some success. Let me first thank U.S. Ambassador John Phillips and his wonderful wife, Linda Douglas, for hosting us last night at the glorious residence of the ambassador. As John said, we are the oldest of friends. I don't think either one of us imagined 40 years ago in Los Angeles that I would eventually serve 9 terms in the United States Congress and have this job, or that he would build cities in Italy and have his, or Borgos anyway, and have his job. And it is wonderful to reunite here and to see what he's doing and what everyone at Cass is doing. This is my second visit to Cass, my third visit to Rome as the head of the Wilson Center. This institution is unique, in many ways unique, just like the Wilson Center. You combine impressive scholarship with policy, and that is the point of the Wilson Center, which was set up to honor, to be the living memorial to the only U.S. president, Woodrow Wilson, with a PhD, the only one who spent a very long career as a scholar, culminating with the presidency of Princeton, and a shorter but very impressive career in the policy world as the governor of New Jersey and then president for 2 terms. Woodrow Wilson wrote his PhD thesis on Congress. He did understand the role, the important role the U.S. Congress must play in the formulation of U.S. policy. He lived 100 years ago, and were he here today, he would be horrified to see what the U.S. Congress presently is. And I have firsthand knowledge since I left there very recently in 2011. I am no Jim Billington. I agree. He is still extraordinary. He is in total command as the Librarian of Congress. And over the years, I, for one, once went on a tour of the Kremlin with him. He knows everything about the Kremlin. He knows everything about everything. But one thing he doesn't know as much as I do, or my predecessor, Lee Hamilton, did, is about the United States Congress. and what it can do and what it unfortunately cannot do. And so after Jim Billington at the Wilson Center, there were 12 wonderful years with Lee Hamilton as the head. Many of you knew Lee when you were scholars. And now there are 3 years of Jane. And we will see how that goes, but my amazing colleagues are here, and I will introduce them in a moment. First, thanks to Johnny DiGennaro, whom I met when I was here before, who provides superb leadership now and for the future of CAS, to Paolo Messa, to Giussi DeCio, to Desiree Verde, who have made a big effort to support this conference and to bring perfect weather to Rome for the occasion. We also should, as others have mentioned, pause for a minute to honor the history of this extraordinary building. Many of you remember fondly the Castle in Washington. Some of you were scholars there. The Castle is a part of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. So is the current Wilson Center. But the Castle is charming, and the Wilson Center was in little pieces of it, including up in the top, and this wonderful 5 o'clock sherry gathering was in the Castle. Where we are now is less interesting, I think. Bigger, but less interesting in the Reagan building. Where you are is fantastic. This building is amazing. The Roman statues are extraordinary in the courtyard. It dates from the 1st century BC. We have nothing in the United States that dates from anything before 1700, more or less. The ceiling paintings in the various rooms are from the 17th century. This building is a national treasure. And so is Giuliano Amato. I thought what you just said was so brilliant. You are very much in the Wilsonian tradition. A preeminent scholar, a trusted and respected politician, twice Prime Minister of Italy, and now Justice of the State Constitutional Court. We are so honored that you are here. Just a few more comments, and then I want to make some general remarks. We are never far away from the memory and the reality, sadly, these days, of terrorism, which affects everyone. Mike Van Dusen, whom I'll introduce right now, who's in the back. He's very shy and retiring, but he is the absolute rock of the Wilson Center and now the leader of our alumni effort, pointed out to me that in the street below, I guess I hadn't known that, the street below is where in 1978, following the assassination of Prime Minister Aldo Moro, his body was found in a car. And so even here in this pristine and beautiful part of Rome, horror lurks. And our hope is, or certainly mine, and I think everyone here, is that we can find bridges that will prevent more horror, not just in the West and in the United States, but obviously in the Middle East, where too many people have died innocently because of various kinds of feuds going on there. And it is something we all must stop to mourn. As Mike mentioned last night, this is the largest alumni gathering ever of the Wilson Center. There are close to 100 people. You are from all over, from 20 countries. A quarter of you are from Ukraine and Russia. I think our panel this afternoon on Ukraine and Russia will be fascinating. So will our off-the-record discussions on the same topic tomorrow, led by Blair Rubel, who was the very long and capable head of our Kennan Institute on Russia. Blair is now our vice president for all the programs at the Wilson Center. But it is significant that this turnout is here and that you are already having these quiet conversations together. Let me just mention a few other people that are here. Mike mentioned last night the key role of Baron van der Vee, who is a founder and treasurer of the European Alumni Association. I gather as treasurer that Dr. van der Vee told tax authorities in Belgium every 2 years that the Alumni Association lost money and owed nothing. Is that true? Mm-hmm. You wonder what was going on. And that will change. Another two key players in the Alumni Association are Sam and Sherry Wells. Obviously, they go back with Dr. Amato some years. Sam is still a scholar at the Wilson Center, and he seems, I was teasing him, to be stalking me. He's everywhere. And it is wonderful to have the continuity on display all the time at the Wilson Center. I suspect that several alumni came here, Sam and Sherry, just to see you. You have the longest link with the Wilson Center. Also want to recognize, and I just have, Blair Rubel, who is our Vice President for Programs, and spent 2 decades at the Kennett Institute. Very long and very valued service. And Christian Osterman, who is the director of the Cold War International History Project. We call it History and Public Policy, HAP, and of our Global Europe programs. Many of you know about this. I'm sure Christian will take the time to tell you more about it. We are the only institution in the United States, I think maybe even including the vaunted Jim Billington Library of Congress, that has an archive base like this, and it is free online. Free online, and our online digital archives system has won awards because it is so impressive. Let me just make a few general comments because this is the second keynote of the morning. We already had that, but I said I agreed with Dr. Amato, and I want to make a few additions maybe to his comments. He talked about the origins of religion in the United States. We do have separation of church and state, but we have a very religious society. I think that's an important insight. I really do. And I think we have undervalued it. And there is a lot that we could do, perhaps, to persuade those who think they are right and their religion is right, and the rest of us are sacrilegious. That, just maybe there is an opportunity for many populations that are also religious to bond together. It's a very good insight, and it is something we have rejected too easily. Secondly, you made a point about Henry Kissinger's book, World Order. I have recently read it. I would recommend it to everybody. He does an extraordinary job of explaining from the Treaty of Westphalia forward, at least in the West, how we have tried in many ways to find world order and not really succeeded. But he goes beyond that. He talks about other parts of the world, basically the whole world, and what their concepts of order were and are, and offers some ways we could bridge this world. It is we should make Henry an honorary Wilson Scholar because he does understand the true link between history and scholarship and public policy. And the good news is that Henry Kissinger is only 91 years old, only. His brain is just fine, his body moves, and it is his name on our China program. We have the Kissinger Institute on China and the United States. And I tell you the whole name because we put China before we put the United States. The point is to bridge understanding 2 directions, of China in the US, but also of the US in China. And Henry was at the Wilson Center recently when the ambassador from China to the US presented calligraphy with Henry's name on it, and in a very Chinese way. Whatever that character is a direct link between China and the US. And I would say a final thing, I sit next to Henry Kissinger on our Defense Policy Board. I'm on an advisory board to our Secretary of Defense and to our Secretary of State and several others. And he's 91, so sometimes he falls asleep. So I go like that. Whenever his name is mentioned, he's awake. But sometimes he falls asleep, and I don't think that's a good idea if the Secretary of Defense is talking. So I go like this. And then I go and get him some coffee. And one day he said, "You know, you are my mother." And I said, "Okay, I'm sure you don't have one now and you need one, so I accept." And ever since, every time I see him, he said, "Oh, my mother's here, my mother." And so this is a unique role that I play. Jim Billington never had this role. I am Henry Kissinger's mother. Finally, and maybe this is another way to see what Dr. Amato said. You talked about what we call in the States the use of soft power. We have to, our foreign policy must be much more than drones plus this motto, "Don't do stupid stuff." I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm saying it is perceived that way. It has to be much more. We have to win the argument with some kid in the boonies of Yemen who is deciding whether to strap on a suicide vest, or in Syria or someplace, or some kid in the United States who's deciding whether to leave and become a foreign fighter, or in Italy, and you have foreign fighters too. We have to win that argument. How do we win that argument? We do win it by living our values. Living our values. That means we need to close Guantanamo Bay Prison and change some U.S. policies. And I think we are doing that. President Obama's committed to doing that. But we have to do it not just by living those values, but by communicating better through social media. ISIL and the bad guys have a command right now of social media. Social media reaches younger people much better than my speech ever will. And there is a youth bulge in the Middle East. Most everyone is under 30, and they're getting information from one side but not the other side. And the challenge is to find much better mechanisms to deliver the right messages, which are true messages, including about the religious nature of U.S. society, the values that we hold, and the links, obviously, between our history in Europe and elsewhere, to people who are hungry for answers. And if we provide better answers, we will win. And that is what I guess I really want to say. This meeting today is extraordinarily important. It is marvelous to see some good friends that I have made since coming to the Wilson Center, but also some old friends of the Wilson Center that will keep it the wonderful place it is. And we will, today, I know, not only have 3 great panels, but offline discussions to build the bridges and restore the bridges that are so badly needed in the world. Thank you very much.